Alright, so this week's chapter of My Hero Academia wasn't nearly as heavy as the previous, but even still, as usual, it was pretty enjoyable nevertheless. The last one, however, wow, what a phenomenal chapter, and clearly plenty of you enjoyed it as well, so thank you all for the support on that discussion. But yeah, from segregating their children to running from their own son, the Todoroki parents were struggling big time. Toya, feeling exceedingly estranged from his own family, would only spiral further and further from sanity. However, he'd never strayed from his training, and as such, thanks to honing his quirk for several years by his lonesome, he came to understand the relationship between his emotions and his quirk. This being the transition from red flames to blue. Now excited, Toya would ask his father to give him another chance by going to Sekoto Peak the next time he has a day off. But Endeavor never came. These overbearing emotions in Toya would go on to cause a sort of volatile quirk instability in the form of spontaneous combustion, and with this loss, the family would only become worse and worse. But now realizing that they all may have played a part in the fate of Toya, have decided to shoulder the burden together as a family once again, all while Hawks and Best Jeanist remain right outside. With this latest chapter, we pick up right from there as Hawks and Jeanist would enter the room after having listened in on the entire conversation, now asking if they may also be a part of this family venture. Now, this was a shock to everyone, and I'd imagine that for Endeavor, this was especially surprising. For one, he has no idea how much Hawks truly admires him, and what's more is that Hawks was dragged into their family problems severely with Dabi's public address and the state that he has now been left in. It's a lot. Hawks would then convey that he was released the day before and has simply been gathering information with the time that he's had. But just then, Rei would bow before him, apologizing for the sins of her son, much to the shock of Hawks and Jeanist. Now, Hawks in a panic would tell her that she doesn't need to apologize and that wasn't what his intentions were for coming here. Jeanist would then help her up, now saying that they came specifically for information on Dabi, although their eavesdropping was a bit rude. For them to deal with the situation, coming to know of Dabi's reasoning would be a big help. But furthermore, they would also like to know how he managed to survive and how he became Dabi. Which just tells me that there's more Dabi backstory to be had, so that's great. And you know, I thought I might be tired of it by now, but listen, after that last chapter, I am all for it. Dabi is right now one of the most believable villains in the series, and if there's more to the story, then that's more that I want to know. Hawks would then attempt to lighten the mood with his usual probing that tends to make others more uncomfortable by saying that he used to watch videos of Endeavor all the time, reflecting on how tainted his childhood obsession looks to be now. An understatement considering how much Endeavor meant to him as a child, and even now despite it all. Endeavor would lack the words to respond here, but Hawks, now all chummy, would go to the side of Shoto and ask a question. He'd ask if Shoto's burn mark was the handiwork of his father as well. But Rei would be quick to take responsibility. Shoto would go to speak, but would swiftly stop himself, and I honestly wonder what he thought to say and how he feels about it all. We know that Toya saw his mother to be just as guilty as his father, but Shoto never possessed that sentiment. In fact, he championed his mother for as far back as we've seen, so how he feels now is something I'm certainly fascinated by. Hawks would then be able to put two and two together based on what she had said previously and consider his own childhood situation of abuse as well. He'd think about how he couldn't face his parents himself and that he simply gave up and abandoned them, then saying aloud how cool Shoto is. And I have to agree. And that's because without getting into too much, I'm more like Hawks here. And I must say that it definitely takes a certain strength to persevere and be like Shoto in this case. Although I'd argue that Hawks was far younger and not exactly given a proper opportunity or anyone like Deku to knock some sense into him. Not to mention that at least the figures in Shoto's life began to try and improve and make amends for their past transgressions. So I feel like maybe Hawks should cut himself a bit of slack here. Anyway, Hawks would then describe the current situation to Endeavor. A situation I highly doubt I need to convey to you, as it is the very same situation we have come to know for weeks now. One key bit of information, however, being the government's request for aid from overseas heroes. Something that fans have been speculating for quite some time now. Something that over here on the channel we have said is a necessary convention, as realistically, the Japanese government would not allow the country to be completely dissolved without seeking this sort of foreign aid. However, with the Public Safety Commission being in such a depraved state, the process of bringing heroes over has been rather difficult. Now, when images of this chapter leaked over on Twitter and Instagram, we discussed how this one silhouette in particular appears to be Electroplant, the American hero from the first My Hero Academia film. Now, what's insane about all this is that this is only within the first 2 days of devastation. Lord knows how things will look in a week's time if nothing is done. And it is for this reason that Endeavor has no choice but to fight. But with that, Hawks and Best Jeanist would again offer their services. Hawks then saying that Endeavor should just consider it a team up between the top 3 heroes, as both men were completely down, ride or die trying. Then asking the man if the support of his family and colleagues is enough to lighten his burden, as he would then cry some more in agreeance. Natsuo not being as strong as Shoto in this regard, then piping up that it's just until he stops Toya. The topic of handling the press would then arise, something that Hawks, having been a media favorite, had pondered for some time. But one oddity stuck out. He'd then ask Endeavor, "What is one for all?" A question which absolutely gave me chills. Now Fuyumi too would recognize this term, as when they were headed into the building, the press would say that Endeavor during his fight with Shigaraki muttered something about one for all. They'd further inquire if it has any relation to the villain All for One, and at this point, I have goosebumps like crazy. Hawks then said that they need to know what One for All is, as the memories would rush back to Endeavor. The words of Deku. As he would then begin to share, while elsewhere, Bakugo was screaming Deku's name so viciously that blood spewed from his mouth, now finally being hauled away by his classmates. And as concerning as the situation stood to be in his case, at least Bakugo still had plenty of energy in him. At this point, Tokoyami and Kaminari were ready to be discharged, and so most of the kids were recuperating pretty well with the exception of Deku. And Uraraka couldn't help being anxious in knowing this. Hawks and Jeanist would then go to see Deku and be met by the many kids, as Jeanist would greet his young protege Bakugo with that horrendously long hero name of his. Ida would then tell Hawks that All Might requested to be alone with him for a time. Now, come on, how is that not weird to any of them? I mean, as far as they all know, All Might is just his teacher. I doubt anyone would talk back to All Might or anything, but yeah, strange from the outside looking in. Something that Hawks clearly considered as well. But inside the room, we would see the two, as All Might could sense it, that Deku was having a conversation with the previous wielders of the power. And that was the chapter. And I told you so. I don't know why some people doubted me, as it wasn't nearly as far-fetched as some of the other predictions we've had proven to be true, but yeah, Deku is communicating with the predecessors. The fact that One for All is on the verge of becoming public information has me beyond hype. I mean, this is something that we have been waiting for forever, so yeah, wild stuff. The amount of suspense and excitement of this story continues to surmount and accumulate, and I hope that you guys are enjoying this as much as I am. Enough to subscribe to Plot Armor with notifications on. And if you'd care for even more anime and manga greatness from us, then you should definitely check out our Patreon page, which is linked in the description below and the card above. Because when it comes to bringing you some of the best My Hero Academia content on the platform, Plot Armor has you covered. As always, I'm Slice of Otaku. Thank you all so much for watching and have an awesome day. I love you.